Well, it's Mike Cohen from the Suburban with a very special presentation today for you. I'm with Beryl Wiseman. I'm with Richard and Sandy, and this is a story about advocacy journalism at its best. So, if you read the front page story, it was like a spy thriller in this week's Suburban by Beryl Wiseman. And Beryl, why don't you first tell us what the story was about?
Well, when we got the text from Richard and Sandy by, I think it was Instagram Messenger, um, it was clear that they had a problem. They were in Lebanon. The authorities at the airport had discovered that there was a stamp, not an official visa stamp, but a little sticker on the outside of a passport with a Hebrew letter that indicated that they had been to Israel. The authorities then, as soon as we got it, I called Richard and Sandy on WhatsApp. We talked, and the authorities had asked Sandy, where she's from. She said she's Canadian. That, of course, didn't satisfy them. But her background is Indian, so they felt they had no authority over her, even though she's a Canadian citizen, born here. Richard, born here. Richard's an Armenian, but openly and honestly told them that his father was raised in Lebanon. So Richard, according to them, became property of theirs. So even because of this little sticker, which was a tourist sticker when they had gone to Israel in 2018, Lebanon is one of only 4 countries, the others being Algeria, Libya, and Syria, that do not accept any evidence of a visit to Israel. They seized his passport, they seized his cell phone. They said you are to appear before a security tribunal on August the 12th. And obviously, panic set in because he could have been liable to anything. Their suspicions were, are you a spy? Are you an operative? Whatever. And we got to work, and using people in other parts of my life, diplomats and intelligence people from a variety of countries, we finally got, and this I'm allowed to say, so I will say these 2 names because they wanted me to say it. It was actually the former Israeli consul general in Montreal, and this is in the story, days before he left, his tour ended, who said, call Faisal El-Khoury, who's the Liberal MP for Laval Azil. And I called Faisal, and he was very grateful for the call. He leapt into action, and he told me that his sister had gone through the same thing. And Faisal was born in Lebanon, and his sister was born in Lebanon. Same thing. And he said, let me make a couple of calls. He made a couple of calls, including one critical call, which I am not at liberty to say to who. And he said, let them just show up, and they will not go up before there was a judge named to their case, Fadi Akiki, an administrative security judge. And he said, they will not have to appear before the judge, but they will have to go and get his passport and his cell phone back, but everything will go well. And just as a funny aside to the story, he still took him 4 hours because there was pictures on his phone of Jerry Seinfeld in Israel.
Yeah, what a story that is.
And this, whoever this lieutenant was, did not know who Seinfeld was. I guess he just looked Jewish to him, and he figured, okay, Richard Mushian must be tied up with God knows what. He got it back. They were going on Turkish Airlines the Wednesday, the 13th, back to Montreal through Istanbul. And all I told them was, look, do not discuss this amongst yourselves on the plane. There are people on the plane who might overhear, and just call me. Let me know when you get back. When they got back to the airport, they took a selfie, which is the cover of the paper, and with a little text, we made it. And
so the 2 of them.
It was 5 days of calls and cajoling through, I'd say, 5 countries, and of course everything had to be done at their time level, so at their time frame. So like the calls from our time, I would make at 1 or 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning to get people over there.
So it was the 2 of you with your daughter, and Richard, why don't you tell me? I'll pass the microphone over to you. Why don't you tell us, why did you reach out to the Suburban?
Ultimately, it was to, not only very selfishly, I mean, obviously to get some help and some support because foreign affairs kind of wasn't extremely supportive. They gave us a list of lawyers to reach out to, with actually none of which reached out. But ultimately, to get the message out to the readership that it's important to, I'll call it, to own your passport. Any stickers on the passport, remove them. Know where you've been. Obviously, it's obvious to say, but know which nations are in conflict, which nations have animosity between each other, and read those travel advisories, because admittedly, this is a proof of Israeli visit is something on the Foreign Affairs website. However, maybe the consequences weren't extremely clear to us. And again, Israel doesn't stamp to avoid these types of issues. But I guess we had gone to Bethlehem. I think maybe the security officials, we had taken a bus to get there, had probably put a sticker indicating that they're cleared, or their luggage is cleared. So again, public service announcement: own your passport, know where you're going, know the animosity, know any conflicts that are in the nation you're going. This was a trip to really understand the roots of where my family was from. To experience the beautiful Lebanese culture, the great food, the nice people, and the beautiful beaches. But certainly we didn't get a chance to enjoy all those great things.
So Beryl and I are on the phone with each other very often.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to Richard's point, and talking to Richard and Sandy about the embassy. I made a call to the embassy, astoundingly, and it's not unfair to call it a war zone. The Canadian embassy in Beirut is closed on the weekend. Not only is the embassy closed on the weekend, the number you dial gives you a message. It clicks off after the dial tone and gives you a message that it's closed on the weekend. And these two got messages. They were from our embassy personnel with the cheery voice as Sandy described to me. Oh, are you back in Montreal yet?
Yeah. I mean, they were responsive. We had them on WhatsApp. So in that sense, they called us. We called them Friday, August 1st. They got back to us rather quickly and basically said that they don't get involved in legal matters, and here's a list of lawyers. And then they called us, I guess, exactly a week later to find out if we were back on our way to Montreal, if we'd gotten our passport. And I said no. And then to which the woman had replied, she's like, oh yeah, sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks. So it was kind of vague. Like I don't think they know the process, but she was like, oh, that's the process and that's how they treat people. You're considered Lebanese. And I was like, news to me, because last time I checked, we were both Canadian citizens, Canadian born, and we were treated like we were from elsewhere.
So as I was saying, Beryl and I are in communications on a regular basis. You reached out to us on a Saturday night. Beryl is a 24/7 editor, and I'm a 24/7 writer and blogger and everything else I do. So I reached out to Beryl on a Saturday night. He sprung into action right away. And look, I want to throw it out there as a PSA. You read the paper every day, and it's nice to know that you decided to turn to the Suburban.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, my husband is an avid newsreader, and he will go out of his way when we're like at the mall to go grab a copy of the Suburban. It's a great place to pick up on local news and whatnot. And I think, like Richard mentioned, or we mentioned earlier, is he's the type of guy who wants to go into things prepared. And we didn't know what this meeting was going to entail. And I think part of this was like, hey, let's reach out to anyone who could possibly help us. And we had no idea when we sent out this message, whatever that date was, Saturday, that we'd be connected with Mike and Beryl, who has all kinds of connections and was able to assist us.
So two more questions, one more for Richard and one more for Beryl. Richard, how relieved are you that this is over and you can go back to your normal life?
Well, that was the big fear, right? The uncertainty. When we first went to the office, they had said, you'll get all your stuff back in 4 days. The airport security said, no problem, no problem. They kept saying that. They took my passport though, so no problem. Easier said than done. And my cell phone. And when we went back on the Tuesday, Monday was a holiday, they just brushed us off. We couldn't get past the gate, and they said, come back in 7 to 10 days. We were flying out in 5. So implications for work, obviously, you need to extend your tickets, hotels. My daughter and my wife have respective lives back home as well, so it was a big it was a huge stress, and obviously a huge relief of stress once the Suburban Barrel and Mike, sort of mobilized and worked their magic. So
And your own lawyer had told you that the potential consequences from nothing to serious, which we can talk about it now, but you didn't want to mention it in the hotel room because your daughter was there. He did not give you, he gave you a range of options, but not a range of solutions,
Well,
a range of things that could happen to you, depending on what they determined would come out of the cell phone.
it could have been being held indefinitely because they were investigating, and an investigation can take 48 hours. It could take 48 days. So that, I mean, I wasn't too worried about that, but it certainly was a possibility. And the other possibility was on that day of the hearing that, again, it's not resolved. We had made a decision as a family that my daughter and my wife would come back to Canada, even if it didn't work out for me. But yeah, that's a big worry that you have.
And let's make it clear that these are entrepreneurial. Well, Sandy's an entrepreneur. Richard is a computer engineer working for a major company. There's nothing in their background that would have sparked anything or prepared them for this.
No, and I think that's part of why we initially weren't concerned. And like, again, we were let into the country, they had stamped our visas, and this all kind of transpired after. But they reassured us, they're like, don't worry, nothing's wrong, you'll get your stuff back on Tuesday. So we went to our hotel, we checked in. Obviously, like, it did stress us, but we still continued along with our plans, knowing that we would go on Tuesday. But I'm also not completely naive, knowing that bureaucracy is going to be bureaucratic. So when we did show up on Tuesday, I was like, yeah, I guess it was kind of wishful thinking to think, hey, Monday's a holiday, Friday they work half day, that, okay, poof, our passport's going to be at this other office on Tuesday. So that is when, we did kind of jump into action and start actually calling lawyers and people to help us, and friends of the family, to see, like, hey, can you get more information of, like, when this date is actually going to be and whatnot. So,
and I think it's important for our listeners, for readers, for Canadians, for Montrealers to know. First of all, this is not the first case where we've done this. The most famous case we've done this was Saul Itziak, Hamsteader, Canadian, Israeli-born. When it goes into India with a visa that's 3 days expired, thrown into jail in the easternmost province of India, a province. Help me out here. It's where Gandhi was in jail. It's the easternmost province in the Horn of India, like the size of Nova Scotia, but 80 million people. I'm called by his sister, who was told by Julius Greyer when called, you got to call Beryl. I mean, these are lawyers, and they didn't know what to do. I called our embassy in Delhi. They said, this is the 10th rung of the third world in that province. We're not going. It's one thing for a government to say we can't interfere in the internal legal affairs of a country. It's another thing for a government, and I've come across countless cases of this, not to send somebody to comfort the family, not to have legal people in the city, in the system, ready to stand by to help Canadians, not to make any calls because they consider it interference in the legal matters. It's not interference when you're calling to get information, when you're calling to comfort Canadian citizens. It's total abandonment of what a foreign ministry is.
There's another call for advocacy journalism happening right now on our call right now. So listen, I'm gonna stop it at that point. I urge people to go to the suburban.com. You can read the story. It was in the August 21st edition, the August 20th edition, and you can also go to the editorial. Advocacy journalism at its best. Glad to have you home and glad to have met you all in person. Thank you.
Thank you.